Hello and welcome to The Bottom Line on TVP World. This is where we unpack some of the main business and economic stories of the day. I'm your host, Marie Cato. When we think of rockets and the space industry, most of us associate it with Elon Musk and SpaceX because they have dominated the global space industry. But there's so much more happening on the scene closer to home in our region. Let's go to Jan Kennedy's feature report.
This is Norway. And at the end of March, history will be made here. That's when a rocket called Spectrum, manufactured by a German startup, Isar Aerospace, will take its first flight. Its maiden voyage will begin at the Andøya spaceport in Norway, the first ever orbital launch from European soil. The company has secured an impressive 400 million euros in funding and aims to build 40 launch vehicles per year, capable of putting 1 ton into orbit. Isar says each launch will cost approximately $10 million. But most importantly, Spectrum will bring much-needed competition to the European launch industry, dominated by incumbents like Arianespace. The rocket potentially will also prove that Europe can compete globally.
Right now, and all the industry which is focused on reusing the parts and on pushing down the price of this 1 kilogram, which is launching into space. Europe forgot about it a little bit, and that's why we became dependent on different providers, launch providers, and I guess this was the main mistake.
Europe's launch efforts have been left in the dust by SpaceX, an American company founded by Elon Musk. SpaceX undercut Europe's players on price, and the continent has been very slow to respond. Experts say the main reason for the stalemate of the European industry is low appetite for risk.
I think the major factor. Europe has money, but is reluctant to spend it on risky innovations.
In effect, over the past 10-15 years, Europe has struggled to compete against the US sector, which currently appears to have launched beyond Europe's reach. To put this into perspective, the European Space Agency's new Ariane 6 rocket is non-reusable and costs 50% more per launch compared to SpaceX's Falcon 9.
This is the problem of the approach to the overall market related to the access to space. In US, we have like a more private investors in that area. In Europe, we still keep that competences close to the governments, and maybe that this is one of the reasons.
But Europe is learning from its mistakes. That's why the European Space Agency has initiated European Launcher Challenge, a program meant to incubate new entrants to the launch market who will provide such services for the agency. A similar endeavor by NASA, undertaken more than 15 years ago, has spawned SpaceX, and with it a whole new industry. Money and appetite for risk are crucial because Europe does not lack the talent, as other successful European endeavors in the space sector show.
We have several programs and projects where Europe is leading. I take the navigation program Galileo as one example, where we have the most accurate signal in the world, which is produced from the Galileo PNT satellites.
It remains to be seen whether renewed efforts in Europe will finally spawn a worthy competitor to SpaceX.
So Europe is taking strides to develop its space industry, and it does have the potential. However, on the launcher side, the continent still lags behind the US, which also has security implications given the current climate between Washington and Brussels. To tell us about that, I am joined by Kinga Gruszecka, Chairwoman of the Polish Space Professionals Association. Hello, and thank you for joining us in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
So, Isar Aerospace is a great startup story that might be changing the story of the European space industry. To begin with, tell us, does this Munich startup have the potential to become the European SpaceX?
I hope so, but they are in front of the first test. So we are all waiting for the first test, and what is more important to remember, that's only the first test, which means we have to be patient. That's still research and development. That's still a very ambitious project. And even though Andøya spaceport was very kind, especially to Polish research institute, Institute of Aviation, who launched a rocket, Bursztyn, for 100 kilometers up, so reach the space. We are waiting for Isar start, for Isar launch, and to know what they learn through this attempt.
If Isar Spectrum rocket does make it into orbit, what does this actually mean for Europe's space industry? Because obviously it's a big achievement for their company, and especially for the three guys who set up the company. Yeah. But where does it take Europe in terms of the space industry itself?
I believe it gives us a tool that we can use. We have to remember that in case of SpaceX, even though they were already launching Falcon and very successful and on everyone's mouths, basically, they also have to, one side, create Starlink to make the business case for Falcon and for reusable rocket. So when I say that it gives us a tool, it gives us also the great potential. We can launch from Europe. We don't have to be independent. And yes, we have the access from French Guiana, which is great. But I would say Andøya is way closer. Mm-hmm. So it also means cheaper when it comes to logistics and transport. We can launch from our European port. Earth observation satellites that are very important, not only for military purposes, but mostly for civil purposes as well. We can launch satellites for communication. That is actually Starlink case as well. So we will be independent. And independency, bringing a competitor for a monopoly, it's always helpful for the market, because it will means that the prices will drop.
Isar Aerospace aims for 40 launches a year. I wanted to ask you, is that actually doable, taking into account that no one but SpaceX has managed to get that cadence? And also, is there a market for cargo up to 1 ton, so up to 1 ton, 40 launches a year? Does the company actually have a business case of that sort?
That's a very good question, but I trust their business analytics. And I think that it will bring a great potential to Europe. We don't have, for example, in Poland, we don't have Earth observation satellites. That might help us to have one, because, again, prices will be lower. We have OneWeb solution, so satellite communication on low Earth orbit and mid-Earth orbit. But we are talking about IRIS² solution as European Commission, which brings satellite communication. So there are many different projects and ideas, dreams basically, of being able to use the technology that are waiting for such a capability. If 40 means that we will fulfill our dreams and ambitions, great. It might be less. Again, we have to set very ambitious goals, and we have to show that we as Europe are able to reach the goal.
Definitely. Commercial space access, I wanted to move on to that. Why is Europe so behind in this regard? Because that realization doesn't happen overnight. Europe really needs to get its act together. I think this is something that has really dawned upon us. How long do you think it might take for Europe to establish a solid commercial space industry?
Oh gosh, that's super important but hard question. There are many activities. For example, there is USPA that is trying for years and doing a great job in bringing investors with startups, igniting startups and innovation to the ecosystem in Europe to show the potential in transfer technology, in using satellite technology data, everything that is connected to what might optimize our processes in the world and help our planet, basically. There are so many activities focused on commercialization, and still it's not happening. It's not at the level that I would expect after such a great such a great budget invested. And I'm not sure if it's the same for all Europe. I think that in Poland especially, we tend to be somehow in better position, mostly through European Commission funds that come with like innovation funds and grants for startups, a lot of actions for startups, but at the same time we don't have knowledge and experience that other countries have. So commercialization is very important, especially in space sector, but at the same time it's harder because it's super expensive. That's first of all. And secondly, not many people understand that it's research and development, it's high technology, it needs time, it needs experience. And I know that there are some great technologies solved and proposed by people who had no experience or they just have great talents on board. But at the same time, nothing helps as much as people who have 20, 30 years of experience in the field. And this is a missing part. We tend to look at the public administration, at public sector, telling us what to bring as a technology, what they want to buy, what we have to develop. So public is our main customer. And we don't have this entrepreneur spirit as, for example, US companies.
Well, I'm gonna push a little further in the same thread because NASA started a special program, obviously I'm sure you know, for commercial launch services almost 20 years ago. And the European Space Agency did that just a couple of days ago. Why did it take so long? Why is it? Why are we here and NASA is, you know, we're in the same place where NASA is 20 years ago?
We never spent the same money as NASA. European Space Agency budget, it's not even closely related to NASA budget. And we have to remember that ESA is doing whatever national delegates and member states tells them to do. If member states would see that as important earlier, I'm sure ESA would implement that earlier because they have great engineers, great minds, but sometimes bringing common understanding through Europe, it's hard. And
do you think the member states now really understand the value of this sort of investment?
I hope so. I work in the space sector, so I truly hope that member states see the value in space data solutions and understand how technology transfer can help in everyday life and in optimizing so many areas and so many sectors, that I hope it's true. But at the same time, I was privileged to work at Polish Space Agency, and I know how hard it is to have a common ground and understanding. And this year is our ministerial year. That means that our ministries responsible for space policy will meet with others at ESA conference and will decide where we want to put money for the next 2 years. And this is crucial for industry development. Again, we don't have that much of private funding. Isar Aerospace had institutions backing up, banking, private investors, also research agencies, so all was in favor. But we have to have funding, we have to have a purpose and a goal to go. This might ensure us the success and independency. NASA started from way different position because back in the 60s when there was a goal to have like a first human on orbit and then on the moon. So for them, understanding the benefits of space industry was different. But then they spent way more on space, understanding the benefits, but also understanding what it gives them, the power of being a prime in space sector.
Well, you say that we need to have a goal, we need to have a vision. What kind of space capabilities is Europe realistically working towards? Because obviously catching up with the US is very difficult. We need to be realistic. But maybe you can tell us from Poland's perspective, what are the realistic goals? Let's say for the next 5 years, maybe 10 years.
That's very good question, because in the space sector, collaboration is very important. We say that very often, that no one can do for themselves. And even taking International Space Station, every agency like ESA, JAXA, NASA, Roscosmos is bringing own capabilities, own strengths to make it happen. So collaboration is very important, but that means that we're looking at collaborations that we established years ago, and that's not always true nowadays. Mm-hmm. For example, ExoMars, we have to change our vision of ExoMars, going to Mars, putting a European rover on the Mars surface. We have to stop that vision for years because we partner with Roscosmos. We are talking about Gateway and moon exploration, that it's very important to Europe. Already many companies and research institutions are working on that. But would that stand? When the US administration is talking about Mars first, and they don't see that much of the value in moon, although then Artemis was the idea of Republican Party and their leaders. So I hope they will keep the moon in the plan, and that's one of the goals. That's one of the idea. Research on ISS, that's also very important also for Poland, because we are just joining. Hopefully in May we will have our first astronaut on ISS that will conduct research there. So we are starting here. But then there are many opportunities in, for example, hybrid connectivity, or using Earth observation data from satellites for agriculture, for cities, and for energy. So there are many different topics. In Poland, we have great companies that already contribute to missions and that already use those space data, Galileo signal, to make our life easier. So I hope we are going there. And I don't want to compete with the US. There is no, I don't see a point in competing with someone with such a large budget. Mm-hmm. We'll not get there. We need to find our gap. Absolutely. We need to find our strengths that US and any other agency, NASA in that case, will see a value in collaboration.
Just as we wrap up, I wanted to ask about all the investment that has gone into Spectrum. We have the European Space Agency, the German government, and the NATO Innovation Fund, and they've invested in Isar Aerospace. It comes at a time when obviously security, defense, and moving away from dependence on the US is obviously a high priority. Do you think that if this launch is successful, that more funding will be allocated to Isar Aerospace?
I hope so, but I hope it will come with commercial contracts for launching the satellites and providing services. That will keep Isar going. Mm-hmm. But I also hope that if they will fail, the funding will not stop. Because after one fail, after one attempt, nothing may happen. We allow our kids and allow employees to make mistakes. We need to allow that to the companies, even when we talk about such an expensive solution. Then I mentioned expensive solution, but I also think that it will bring us some savings in years to come. So at the end, it's economical to have it.
Absolutely. Kinga Gruszecka, thank you so much for joining us, Chairwoman of the Polish Space Professionals Association. Thanks so much for joining us on the show.
Thank you.
And that concludes The Bottom Line for this week. I was your host, Marie Cato. Join us every weekday afternoon at 5:10 CT on TVP World. And for the latest in regional business, follow us on X and on tvpworld.com. And for more news and analysis, stay with us on TVP World. Goodbye.